you ever felt like dancing until you dropped? Well, some people in Europe would actually relate to you because they danced until they dropped to exhaustion and eventually death. This is the case of the plague that killed hundreds of people in France, not with a deadly sickness, but with dancing. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to talk about a more bizarre kind of plague that scientists and historians couldn't figure out how it started. A so-called dancing plague refers to an event in which people dance themselves to death. Reports of this dancing plague circulated in mainland Europe between the 11th and 17th centuries, but there was one particular dancing plague from 1518 that remained notable because of its deadly effect. Before we get to know more about this story, have you ever heard of a dancing plague before? Tell us in the comments below. During the period spanning the 11th to the 17th centuries in mainland Europe, a series of unusual accounts emerged regarding a phenomenon referred to as the dancing plague. This phenomenon was also recognized under the names of St. John's dance and St. Vitus's dance, with Vitus being the patron saint of dancers in the Catholic tradition. According to the narratives, gatherings of individuals would spontaneously engage in erratic dancing while in a state of frenzied delirium. These groups would gradually expand as more entranced dancers and musicians joined in, occasionally amassing thousands of participants. In the most extreme instances of these outbreaks, numerous individuals reportedly danced until their demise due to complete exhaustion. The following historical records describe instances of uncontrollable and, at times, deadly dancing. In the year 1247, reports detail an episode of relentless dancing in the German town of Erfurt. Shortly thereafter, accounts recount around 200 individuals engaging in sacrilegious dancing on a bridge spanning the Moselle River in Maastricht, leading to the bridge's collapse and the drowning of all those involved. Similarly, numerous medieval authors chronicle the distressing urge to dance that spread across Western Germany, the Low Countries, and northeastern France in 1374. These chronicles concur that thousands of people experienced agonizing dancing for days or even weeks, accompanied by cries of horrifying visions and pleas to priests and monks for salvation. A few decades later, an abbot from a monastery near the city of Trier recalled an astonishing epidemic in which a group of hallucinating dancers leaped and hopped for as long as half a year, with some perishing due to fractured ribs or other injuries. But what was considered an outbreak on a far larger scale was in July 1518, when the inhabitants of the city of Strasbourg, which was part of the Holy Roman Empire at the time, experienced an abrupt and seemingly uncontrollable compulsion to engage in dancing. This widespread frenzy was initiated when a woman named Frau Trophia emerged onto the streets and began a silent display of twisting, twirling, and shaking. She appeared like she couldn't stop dancing, persisting in her dance until she succumbed to fatigue. Following a period of rest, she recommenced the obsessive and frenzied behavior. She persisted with her solo dance marathon for nearly a week, and before long, approximately 36 other residents of Strasbourg had joined her in this unusual behavior. By the time August arrived, the dancing epidemic had affected as many as 400 individuals. As there was no other apparent explanation for this phenomenon, local medical practitioners attributed it to hot blood and recommended that those affected dance vigorously to alleviate the fever. A stage was erected and professional dancers were brought in to participate. The town even enlisted the services of a musical band to provide accompaniment. However, before long, the endurance test began to take a toll on the participants. Numerous dancers collapsed due to sheer exhaustion, and some even suffered fatal strokes and heart attacks. This peculiar incident finally concluded in September, when the dancers were transported to a mountain shrine to seek absolution through prayer. A contemporary account in the form of a poem portrays women and men engaged in dancing and hopping in the town's open market, in narrow passageways and thoroughfares, continuously, day and night, until the malady eventually ceases. Additional historical records elaborate on the responses initiated by the authorities. One author describes the transportation of dancers to St. Vitus's shrine, located beyond the city limits, where they are presented with tiny crosses and red footwear. Another source mentions more direct efforts to subdue the dancers through physically demanding interactions. It was said that individuals were specially designated to dance alongside them in exchange for compensation, accompanied by the sounds of drums and pipes. However, these interventions proved futile. According to these authors, all these endeavors proved ineffective, and a significant number danced themselves to their demise. What are your thoughts on the dancing plague so far? Do you think that it's just a myth? Comment with your thoughts below. The incident of 1518 stands as the most extensively recorded occurrence, and likely marks the final instance among several similar episodes that occurred across Europe, predominantly spanning from the 10th to the 16th centuries. Among these occurrences, the most widely recognized one happened in 1374, affecting multiple towns along the course of the Rhine River. A depiction of this dancing epidemic that transpired in Aachen during June 1374, in what is now Germany, a territory that was once part of the Holy Roman Empire, tells us the following. They arranged themselves in link circles and seemed to have surrendered complete mastery over their faculties, persisting in dancing without any regard for onlookers for extended periods, displaying a fervent frenzy. Eventually, they collapsed onto the ground, utterly drained and fatigued. Although there may be doubts about the authenticity of similar occurrences in Kolbeck, Erfurt, and Maastricht, the certainty remains that the epidemics in 1374 and 1518 undoubtedly took place. Numerous trustworthy accounts from numerous towns and cities provide descriptions of the events in 1374. Furthermore, the progress of the 1518 outbreak can be meticulously reconstructed through municipal directives, sermons, and vivid depictions left behind by the accomplished Renaissance physician Paracelsus. These instances of outbreaks present a genuine and captivating puzzle. So, what could really be the cause of these bizarre dancing plagues that pushed people to dance to their deaths? As outlined by historian John Waller, the most probable explanation revolves around Saint Vitus, a Catholic saint whom devout Europeans of the 16th century believed possessed the ability to afflict individuals with a dancing plague. When intertwined with the distressing factors of disease and famine, both of which were wreaking havoc in Strasbourg during 1518, the superstitious notions surrounding Saint Vitus could have instigated a form of hysteria induced by stress, which then gripped a substantial portion of the city's population. This is supported by an additional potential explanation, involving a collective trance-like condition triggered by intense psychological distress, stemming from years of inadequate harvests and devastating illnesses. Alternatively, certain observers have pointed out that the phenomenon shares similarities with possession rituals observed in diverse cultures across the globe. Another possibly credible interpretation is that this event represented a manifestation of mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. This phenomenon describes a scenario wherein groups of people undergo comparable psychological or physical manifestations, such as fainting, as a response to a perceived threat, whether tangible or not. Although exceedingly uncommon, notable instances of this phenomenon have occurred in recent times. For example, in 2011, approximately 18 individuals at a New York high school suddenly exhibited uncontrollable twitching, spasms, and verbal tics, similar to the symptoms of Tourette's syndrome. Additionally, there was a bout of feigning that affected around 1,000 individuals, mainly teenage Palestinian girls, near the West Bank in 1983. Similar to the medieval dancing plagues, instances of modern-day mass psychogenic illnesses can be challenging to distinguish from the effects of actual exposure to environmental dangers. But one proposed hypothesis proves to be compelling after all these years. This theory explaining the phenomenon of the dancing plague involves a specific type of food poisoning called ergot, a fungus present in bread. Ergot has the potential to induce hallucinations, involuntary twitches, and jerking movements, and other symptoms. If the residents of Strasbourg were affected by ergot, it could provide an explanation for their uncontrollable dancing and apparent inability to heed reason or cease their actions. The ergot theory possesses compelling attributes for a variety of reasons. Firstly, bread was a staple food in the region during that period and would have been commonly consumed by the Strasbourg populace. Secondly, the symptoms do align with the general manifestations of the dancing plague. Thirdly, the presence of ergot would offer insight into the recurrence of dancing plagues across multiple regions in Europe over numerous centuries. Around the middle of the 16th century, if not earlier, occurrences of involuntary dancing had ceased to trouble the European population. This disappearance aligned with the decline of the intense belief in supernatural forces that had perpetuated these events. Towards the end of the 17th century, the term Saint Vitus's dance was employed to refer to an entirely distinct medical condition. It is quite understandable that a sudden interest in the dancing plague occurred at this time. Given that over the past 2 years, there has been a heightened fascination with the numerous pandemics that have preceded us, ranging from the Black Death to the Spanish flu due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have examined them not solely for the sake of comparison, but also, it appears, to provide ourselves with a sense of reassurance that all epidemics ultimately come to an end. What are your final thoughts on the dancing plague? Which theory seems most plausible to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a like, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching.